Let's say you took a pencil and you drew a closed shape on a piece of paper. Now what can you do with it? You can fill it up with a color, you can outline on it, you can cut it out, or even burn it with chemicals. You can do whatever you want. There are limitless possibilities. Now in all of these possibilities, there's a common theme right here. What is the common theme? The common theme is we are targeting the same area that we drew. Similarly, in Photoshop, a selection is simply an area that we are targeting. That's it. There are so many ways to create a selection. Just to share a demo with you, let us choose the Quick Selection tool. It is in this group, the Magic Wand, the Quick Selection, and the Object Selection. Anytime you want to open a tool group, just click and hold, and a group will open with more tools inside of it. So let us choose the Quick Selection tool. How it works is that it tries to find edges. We're gonna cover it in detail later. Don't worry about it. Right now, just like the brush, with the bracket keys, you can make it bigger or smaller. And let's target the sweater or whatever she is wearing inside. I'm not too good with apparel. Now you can add to the selection by just painting over certain areas, and you can subtract from selections by just holding the Alt key or the Option key and paint on the areas where you don't want the selection to be. Now the selection is not very proper. You can take your time to improve it, but once the selection is active, that is the area we would be targeting. Whatever you do, that will be the area that is going to be targeted. Whether you take the brush and try to paint over it, let us choose a color. It will only fill in that area, or even if you create an adjustment layer. So let us click on the adjustment layer icon and then choose solid color, and let's go for something like a bright yellow. There you go. That is the only area that is being targeted. Now we did learn it in the layer mask lesson. That is whenever you have an active selection and you create any adjustment layer, that adjustment layer comes with a mask of that active selection. All right. Now, of course, this is not looking realistic, but take notice. Her outfit is white. Now, whatever you want to paint onto white, it will only darken it because nothing can get brighter than white. So what is the blend mode that darkens? Multiply. Darkens smoothly, that is multiply. So change the blend mode from normal to multiply. And just as soon as you do that, have a look at her outfit. Pretty good, isn't it? Now, of course, you can go in, zoom in and improve the mask. Certain areas are not proper. You know already how to do it. Select the mask, take the brush and paint with white where you want the adjustment to show up. There you go. So all in all, what is a selection? A selection is simply an area that we are targeting. Now, before we move forward, do not forget to download the practice file so you can follow along with all of these fun projects. And also, you can find all the lessons of this course at learnphotoshopfree.com. It's updated regularly, it is free, and today's free lesson is sponsored by Storyblocks. Storyblocks is an incredible place to find stock videos, stock photos, music tracks, and even video templates for your next project. While most platforms charge every time you download a creative asset, Storyblocks gives you unlimited access to their massive library of all kinds of creative assets for a fixed fee with clear-cut licensing. You can download whatever you want as much as you want without counting pennies for every download or going through complicated license terms. And to make your creative process even faster, you can use the Storyblocks plugin for Premiere and After Effects to directly search and add content to your timeline without switching platforms. If you're looking for one place to find all kinds of creative assets unlimited, Storyblocks is the place to check out. Link is in the description. Back to the video. Now that we know what selections are, the next obvious question that comes up is, how do we make a selection? Now there are so many ways to make a selection and the list is just about endless. Let's take a look at a few fundamental ones. Number one, you can make a selection with the selection tools, and these tools can be the Lasso tool. For example, I can just draw to make a selection, the Polygonal Lasso tool, the Magnetic Lasso tool, the Rectangular Marquee tool. There you have it, a selection. The Elliptical Marquee tool, there is a selection. Or you can also use the Magic Wand tool, the Quick Selection tool that we just did, or the Object Selection tool. With the Object Selection tool, just make a rough selection of the thing you want to select, and there you go, you have a selection. So that's number one and very obvious. Number two is Pen tool. Now this is a little more advanced and we will cover it in future lessons. Just to show you a quick glimpse, this is the Pen tool, and we can just use the Pen tool to create smooth vector lines like this. Now you can turn it into a selection. Let me quickly do a path around the eye. Now once we do it, any path you make, and these are vector paths, will be inside of the Paths tab. If you cannot see it, go to Window and then go to Paths right here. Paths, I don't know how to pronounce it. So if you click on Work Path, you'll find it right here. Hold the Control or Command, click on the thumbnail to turn that into a selection. It is the best tool to get absolute accurate selections, but the downside is it also takes some time. But if you're working commercially, you're going to be using this a lot. We will cover it in future lessons. However, if you're running out of patience, you can watch this masterclass on pen tool that I had made about 5 years ago. I look very different in that video. Number 3 is color. Yes, you can make a selection based on color. You can say to Photoshop, select the blues, and it will make a selection of the blues. Number 4 is select and mask, which is a whole different dialog box for making fine selections. Number 5, Adobe Sensei, and these are Adobe's AI tools to make a selection. For example, select subject or select sky. It makes a selection of the sky. Number 6 and beyond, you can use the brush tool, you can use channels. There are so many more ways to make a selection. However, some of these are advanced techniques which we'll cover in the future, like the pen tool or channels. For right now, let us focus on the fundamental ones and let's have a lot of fun. Let's start with the selection tools, and the very first obvious one is the Lasso tool right here. Now the Lasso tool is pretty straightforward. All you have to do is to draw to make a selection, and there you have it. Now before we do anything, let us make a copy of the background layer. Now if with the selection active you press Ctrl or Command J, this new layer will have just the selection area. So first make a copy, then make changes. If you have made the selection already and you want to just simply duplicate the layer, just drag it and drop it to the plus icon. That way that fiasco will not happen. Now let's simply fill it up by going to Edit, Content Aware Fill. I'm going to keep everything to defaults, and we want to output to current layer to keep it clean. For now, hit OK. And that area is filled. Now whenever you're done with the selection, to make the selection go away, we press Ctrl or Command D. D for deselect. Ctrl or Command D, deselects. Now there's one more thing you should know about. That is feather. You can add that later. We're going to cover it later. But if you set a feather to about 10 pixels, the selection would be 10 pixels blurred. So right now, if I make a selection like this, and if I try to fill it up with a color, for example, let's set the foreground color to this dark green right here. All right, hit OK. And if I want to fill a selection, all we have to do is to press Alt Backspace or Option Delete. Now when I fill, have a look at the filling. Let's press Ctrl or Command D. It is smooth like this. It has feather in it, okay? If we didn't have feather, let's go back to how it was. If we set the feather to 0, and now if we make a selection, and now if we fill it, have a look, there is no smoothness around the edge. So that's what feathering does. You can also add it later, and we'll cover it later. Now there's a very minor feature but super important to watch out for, and that is anti-alias. And to understand it better, let us use the elliptical marquee tool. By the way, you'll find anti-alias all throughout Photoshop. So right now with the anti-aliasing turned on, let us draw an ellipse. And by the way, you can hold the Shift key to maintain proportion and draw a circle. If you don't hold the Shift key, you create an oval. All right, let us draw this and fill it up. To fill up any selection, don't forget Alt Backspace, Option Delete. Now let's turn off anti-aliasing and draw another one right next to it. By the way, as you're drawing, you can hold the space bar to move it around. All right, let's draw like this and fill it up. So on the right hand side, we have anti-aliasing. What it does is that it introduces transparent pixels to make the edges smoother. On the other hand, with anti-aliasing turned off, have a look at the edge right here. It's either filling the pixel or not filling the pixel, resulting into a hard edge. Now you have to decide what you want to go for. I usually keep anti-aliasing turned on for the most part. And now we have the Polygonal Lasso tool. It simply draws straight lines. You click, 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 click. There you go. Now, once you reach the starting point and once it forms a closed loop, it will show an icon next to it. It will show a circle icon next to it, which means that now the loop is closing. If you click, the loop will be closed. Another thing is, if you draw a selection and if you draw till right here, and from here you want to close the loop, just double click. It will close the loop from there. Now we are humans, we make mistakes. So sometimes as you're making the selection, you may create a point in the wrong place like this. So how do you go back? Yes, you can go back by pressing backspace. that point goes away. So you made a mistake, you want to go back, press backspace. That is gone, and now you can redo it. Now there's a reason that we are learning the lasso tool and the polygonal lasso tool together. It is because both of them are related and you can switch between both of them. Have a look at this. So right now, if you select the lasso tool and if you start drawing, all right, if you hold the Alt key and you release the mouse, now it is a polygonal lasso tool, right? If you hold in the mouse and then you release the Alt key again, now this is the regular lasso tool. Pretty fantastic. Now, of course, you can fill it up by going to Edit, Content Aware Fill. I'm going to keep it the way it is. Hit OK. And there you go, it is covered. Now, these tools are not just for making selections, but also improving them. So let's say you chose the rectangular marquee tool and made a selection around this one. Now, you noticed that this area needs to be selected extra, right? So you go back to the lasso tool. You can hold the Shift key to turn it into Lasso Tool Plus. And now if you make a selection, it will be added to the selection. There you go. There you go. If you feel like you have added too much like this, you can hold the Alt key or the Option key. It turns it into a lasso minus. Same with the polygonal. If you choose the polygonal lasso tool, you hold the Alt key or the Option key, it's polygonal minus. If you hold the Shift key, it's that tool plus. So if you want to subtract, hold the Alt key. If you want to add, hold the Shift key. So let's subtract it by holding the Alt key and then simply subtract it. As simple as that. Now, whatever shortcuts we learned, like Shift for plus, Alt or Option for minus, it's all right here at the top if you don't want to use keyboard shortcuts. But why wouldn't you? But you should know that there are buttons right here. So if I made a selection of this area and we want to add to it, you can click on this button to add to it. And then you have this button right here to subtract from it. And this is the regular one. You can hold the Shift or the Alt to add or subtract. And this is the intersection one. Interesting. So if you select that and make a selection, only the intersecting area will be selected. Now let's talk about the quick selection tool. As the name suggests, it allows you to make quick selections. If you are using the lasso tool to select this teapot, it will take you ages trying to precisely match up with the edges. The way quick selection works is that it tries to find the edges of the object. So let us choose the quick selection tool. It will be inside of this group, the object selection, the quick selection, and the magic wand. Let's go with the quick selection tool. And let's try to select all of these objects. All you have to do is to just paint over it. That's all. It tries to find the edges and it automatically does the selection for you. So let's select this area as well. Now sometimes, actually more times than I want to, it will select a little bit of the extras. So to subtract the extras, you would hold the Alt key or the Option key and paint on the areas where it's not supposed to be. And then if it subtracts too much, you can just paint back in areas where it is supposed to be. Now there's going to be times when it is not very accurate. And for those times, there are other tools like the lasso tool. You can choose that and say, all right, this is not a part of it, and subtract that. Let's select this object as well. This is okay. It's not perfect, but it's okay. Now there are a couple of options at the top you can try. By default, know that the Quick Selection tool is selected to Quick Selection tool plus, and that is why whenever you make a selection, it keeps on adding to it. You can also choose minus from the button right here to subtract an area like this. Plus is already selected by default, and this is the regular one. With the regular one, if you try to make any other selection, the previous selection will be gone because it's making a selection, not adding to it. Now, if you want a little more enhanced selection, you can check Enhance Edge, but it doesn't always work in our favor. So you can experiment by checking it on or off. It's up to you. This is important, and that is Sample All Layers. Right now, I deselected it. If that is checked off and there's a new layer, and you try to make a selection right here, it won't do it properly because this layer is empty. No matter how much you try, it won't be able to select the teapot. However, if you check Sample All Layers, it will take all of the layers into consideration no matter what layer is selected. And then when you make a selection even on an empty layer, it considers the teapot. That's all the difference there is. I'm going to check it off for now. Let's go back to how it was. Now we want to place these objects on a new layer so that we can place it on a luxurious surface. So for it, we already have a selection. So just drag it and drop it to the plus to make a duplicate. And then with the selection active, click on the mask button. So right now we have the objects on its separate layer. Below it, let's introduce something. So I have this marble texture right here. Let's drag it and drop it right here and make it larger. Now, of course, this is not looking realistic. So change the blend mode from normal to overlay since this is a gray background. How does that look? It looks okay, but let us try multiply. Multiply looks even more realistic, but we need to brighten little bits of it. To add some drama, why not add a curves adjustment layer? Click on the adjustment layer icon and then choose curves. Keep in mind, whatever we are doing it underneath the objects. Now to make the bright areas brighter, let's open up the properties of the curves adjustment layer. So click on the symbol of the curves adjustment layer and let's take this slider on the right to the left. Now this is looking nice. Now we only want to add this highlight to a particular area. So let's keep it that way. Select the mask, press Ctrl or Command I to invert it. Now you can take the brush, white as the foreground color, make the brush larger. You can take a soft round brush and just dab right here with white. There you go. Have a look at it. That is looking fantastic. If you want a little more range, you can use the gradient tool right here. White to black gradient. Make sure you choose the radial gradient and just draw a gradient like this. So right here inside of the mask, we have this gradient and it looks fantastic. Let's try one more time like this. That is even better. So here's the before. Not as nice. Here's the after. Now let's talk about Adobe Sensei AI tools. And the first one is Select Sky. And it's as simple to understand as its name. It does select the sky. So right here we have a beautiful long exposure. Wouldn't it be fantastic to have a more dramatic sky? So for it, let's first make a selection of the sky. So let's go to Select and choose Sky. That's all. Once you have a selection, you can do whatever you want with it. So click on the adjustment layer icon and then choose curves. Now let me share with you a trick of curves. By the time we get to curves in this course, probably you'll learn all the tricks of it and how to use it in the first place. Let's zoom in and let's say this is the area that we want to brighten. Use the hand right here. Click on the hand, click and drag it up to brighten the brightness levels of that area. There you go. And let's say this is the brightness level that we want to darken. Notice that as you hover through the image, it gives you an indication of where that brightness level falls. So click and drag it down to darken it. There you go. Zoom out and analyze. So here's the before. Here's the after. So dramatic. Now you can always go back and modify this. I feel that this needs to be a little darker and the dark areas needs to be a little more darker. So there's how you add that drama. Now let's talk about another Adobe Sensei or Adobe AI feature, and that is Select Subject. We have already talked tons about it, but there's a little more to it. So here we have a beautiful landscape and let us composite a subject on top of it. Let's drag it and drop it over the landscape, hit enter or return. Now the Select Subject button will only show up if you choose one of these three tools: the object selection, the quick selection, or the magic wand. I don't know how many times I've said that, but it's important that it gets in your head. Now you can simply click on Select Subject and it does a pretty good job. It does some AI calculations and there you have it. Let's create a mask out of it by clicking on the mask button right here. Let's take a look at the mask. Hold the Alt key or the Option key and click on the mask to see just it. So this is the masking. And it's pretty good. Even if you look at the edges, they're pretty straight and amazing. Now that's one way of doing it. If you want a little more accurate result, here's what you do. Let's go back to how it was before the selection. You can click on the drop down right next to it and choose Cloud. So right now, device is selected. What it does is that it does the calculations, makes the selections using your computer power. If you choose Cloud, it uses Adobe servers to make a more accurate selection, but keep in mind, it does send your image to the cloud to be processed. So if you're concerned about privacy, maybe you don't want to do that. It's absolutely up to you as to where you stand. But for me, accuracy is important, so I just simply choose Cloud and click on Select Subject. Now if you create a mask, you would notice that it is relatively more accurate. Even if you look back right here, it is relatively more accurate. You can do a couple tests of your own and then decide for yourself. Now, once you have a mask, let's click on the layer to get back to the layer. Now, there's a problem with this composite. Can you tell what the problem is? Have a look in the background. The light is coming from the right-hand side and the shadow is on the left-hand side. But on the subject, the light is coming from the left-hand side and the shadow is on the right-hand side. So how do we fix it? You can either flip the landscape or flip the subject, up to you. So select the subject layer, press Ctrl or Command T, right-click on it and then choose Flip Horizontal. And there you go. Fantastic composite. There's another problem with this. The depth is just not there. If you look at the original background, by holding the Shift key and clicking on the mask, it turns off the mask. Have a look, it is blurred. But this one is not as blurred. We can blur it just a little bit. So select the background layer. Let's go to Filter and first convert for smart filters so that you can change the filter level later. Let's go to Filter, Blur Gallery, and we're going to use Tilt Shift right here. You see these solid lines? That's where the blur starts. What do I mean by that? So let's say the blur is 157. So right here along this solid line, the blur is 0. As we gradually move towards one of these dotted lines, from here to here, the blur gradually increases. For example, right here at 0, right here at maybe 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and it goes till 157. Now, what is 157? It is the number you chose right here. Now, any area beyond this dotted line is blurred at 157 pixels. Similarly, the top area as well. So this is 0. As we gradually move up, 0, 5, 10, 15, 30, 40, 50, 60, and right here it is 157, and beyond it, it is 157. And the area between the solid lines, blur is 0. Now, the way we can work with it is this. The place where he's standing, that area definitely is in focus. So we can assume his feet is right here, and the blur starts from there. And let's take it all the way to this area, so that we have a gradual blur. And we don't want to add so much blur. If you want to go for it, go for it. But for this image, we're just going to go for maybe 22. Hit OK. Now that looks more realistic. Now, of course, you can play with the masking, fix the hair, which we'll cover later. Now, you can easily make selections based on color. You can tell Photoshop, all right, this is the color I want to select, and it will do that for you. So right here, let's say you want to remove the green screen. So let's go to Select and then Color Range. So right here, first of all, you can click whatever color you want to select, or you can click on the drop down of the Select right here. You can select the reds, the yellows, the greens, cyans. These are presets. You can select the highlights or the shadows. It's up to you. So I'm going to choose sampled colors. What that allows you to do is to sample a color from the image. So right now we want to select the greens, but this, my friend, is a preview. So how do we turn the preview off? Click on the drop down of the selection preview and set that to none, so that no matter what we select, the image stays the way it is. And right in here, inside of this box, we can see the preview. White are the areas that is selected, black are the areas that are not selected. You can click on image to look at the image, but I leave it at selection. Now with the eyedropper right here, make sure it is the first eyedropper. You can click right here to select the greens. As you can see, this is a fantastic selection of that color. Right here at the top, we have fuzziness. You can think of fuzziness as the tolerance that we covered when we were talking about the magic wand tool. It is simply how similar colors we will be selecting. If the fuzziness is low, colors very close to it will be selected, as you can see right here. As you begin to increase the fuzziness, more and more similar colors to the color that you have selected are going to be selected. If the fuzziness is too high, it's also going to select the insides of it. By the way, you can change the selection preview to grayscale to see the same preview right here. White are the areas that are selected. Of course, we don't want her arms, her skin, her eyes to be selected. This is a scary image. So let's decrease the fuzziness to about 120. That's nice. A little bit of the eye is selected, but we can take care of that. And by the way, if you want to add to this color, so besides green, there's a different shade of green which you also want to select. You can click on the plus eyedropper and keep on adding that shade of green. Let's hit OK for now. Here we have a selection. Another trick for adding different shades is this. Let's go to Select, Color Range with this one. And let's say I wanted to select the reds of this cup. So with the eyedropper, I clicked on it. Now there are different shades that are not selected. First of all, let's decrease the fuzziness to about 50. Okay. So click on the plus eyedropper and you can keep on adding different shades, or you can also draw. So you can just click and hold and draw over it. Once you release, all of those shades are selected. Click and hold and draw over it. So you can either click, or just hold and draw. Let's get back to this image. Once you have the selection done, you can hold the Alt key or the Option key and then click on the mask button Y to create a negative mask, to fill that selected area with black inside of the mask, because that's what we want. We want to remove it. Now, this method is fantastic because it allows you to go through objects like veils where the selection has to be so fine, right? Now, of course, the masking is not proper. If you hold the Alt key or the Option key and click on it, there are a couple areas which are left out. So you can take the brush, white as the foreground color, make sure the mask is selected and paint these areas back in. Not a big deal. Once you're done, you can change the background to whatever you like. Let's add a pattern. Click on the adjustment layer icon and then choose pattern. This is the pattern fill. And you can go with anything you want. Trees. Let's go with this one for now, just to show you what it does. Hit OK. Of course, this needs to be at the back of the subject. You can double click on it, and just like a gradient adjustment layer, you can move it around to your liking. Now, sometimes when you create a background, let's say a different colored background like this one, there's a little green still left on the veil. How do we remove it? By simply creating a hue saturation adjustment layer. Click on the adjustment layer icon and then choose hue saturation. We want it to be limited to the subject layer. How do we do that? By creating a clipping mask. What is another way of creating a clipping mask? That is simply clicking on this button. You can also hold the Alt key and click on the line between the two layers. Now we want to target the greens. So for it, let's click on the drop down and choose greens. You can increase the range of greens selected. First of all, let's take the hue and the saturation all the way to the right to see which areas are being targeted. Then you can expand the range so that the skin is not selected, but all of the greens are. So if you go too high, skin would be selected. So watch out for it, and you can make the transition smoother by increasing the gap right here. Even on the right hand side, you can expand it. There you go, this is nice. And now you can decrease the overall saturation like this. There you go. Now the greens are gone. Fantastic, isn't it? You can even move the hue a little bit. Now you can easily have whatever background you want and not have the greens attached to it. When it comes to selecting hair or fur, there are so many details, so many fine things that you need some special tools to select them. And we're going to be using Select and Mask. Now do keep in mind that Select and Mask is such a vast topic that it deserves a video of its own. We're going to talk about the fundamentals that will get the job done for you. So right here we have this cat. Sometimes select subject is not enough. There are lots of times when it's not enough. So we're just going to click on select subject. By the way, how did we get the select and subject button? By choosing one of these three tools right here, and then we click on select subject. And now let's click on the mask button to mask it out. Let's put a black background, click on the adjustment layer icon and then choose solid color. Let's choose black right here. Put it behind the cat. Let's name the layer. Organization is important. Now, as you can see, the fur is completely gone. This is absolutely not a good selection. So you can click on the mask and go to Select and Mask by clicking on Select and Mask at the top. Now, how do we see the Select and Mask button? You choose any selection tool, and at the top you will see the Select and Mask button. Now, we can definitely go to Select and Mask. It will open up a new dialog box and you can improve the selection right here, or you can just do nothing and make the selection from scratch inside of Select and Mask as well. It's up to you. So let's say there was no mask. Let's drag it and drop it into the trash can, or you can simply select the mask and press the delete key. It'll go that way as well. Let's click on Select and Mask and directly go there. Right now you have different views. The first view right here is onion skin. Now let's change the background color to something else so you can know what onion skin is. Let's change the background color to dark purple. Hit OK. Let's select the cat. Let's go back to Select and Mask. The first view is onion skin. If you increase the transparency all the way to 100, only the areas that are selected will show up, and the areas that are not selected will be of the color of the layers underneath it. So the layer underneath the cat was what? It was purple, so that's why it shows up. And right now nothing is selected, so nothing else shows up. If you decrease the transparency all the way to 0, everything shows up no matter whether you have a selection or not. So let's set the transparency to about 50% so that you can understand it better. The first tool right here on the left is the quick selection tool. And using that tool, let's say we make a selection of the cat. And by the way, how did I make the brush larger? Don't forget, hold the Alt key or the Option key, the right mouse button on Windows, drag it to the right to make it larger, drag it to the left to make it smaller. On a Mac, however, the shortcut is different and you hold the Control and Option and then click and drag. So let's start making a selection. So if the transparency is at 0, everything shows up whether you have made a selection or not. If the transparency is at 100, only the areas that you have selected will show up. The rest of the areas will comprise of the layers underneath it. Again, there are different kinds of views. There is marching ants. This shows marching ants. There is on black view or on white view. If we choose on white view, if the opacity is at 0, as usual, everything shows up. If the opacity is at 100, only the selected area shows up and the rest of the areas are, you guessed it right, white, because the white view is selected. Then there is black and white. White are the areas that are selected. Black are the areas that are not selected. Very easy to understand. For this example, let's set it to on black. And you can decrease the transparency to see the areas which are not selected. Let's make the brush a bit smaller. Let's select this area, that area. Now this is nice. Now for the edges, there's another tool and that is called the Refine Edge tool right here. Now before we get into the Refine Edge tool, you can also try this new button in the later versions of Photoshop and that is Refine Hair. If you click on it, it finds out hair and fur and tries to paint over it automatically. Let's click on Refine Hair. And it does a pretty good job. Let's increase the opacity. There you go. It did the fur right here very well, but it left out this area. So how do we fix that area again? You can paint with the Refine Edge brush tool. Let's paint over the messy areas and Photoshop does the rest for you. Hit OK. There you go. That looks much better. Now there's so many ways to select hair and different situations ask for different techniques. You can refer to this guide about selecting hair. It covers every technique that I recommend for every situation. Whether you have a busy background, an easy background, a white background, whatever the situation might be, you can go through this guide. Now there are lots of obsolete techniques that we are not covering because they simply do not work. Have a look at this one. So here we have our subject in focus and the background out of focus. Now Adobe did make a selection technique for it. If you go to select, there is an option right here called focus area. What it's supposed to do is to select the areas that are in focus. But if you click on it, it sometimes works, sometimes doesn't, and often the result is not as good. Have a look at it. This is what it selects. You can play with the focus range. Still, it is not up to the mark. Even a simple select subject does better than this. So yeah, there are many techniques like this and we don't need to cover it or learn it. It's fine. Now let's say you worked really hard to create a selection of the subject and you want to save this selection. Maybe you used hours with the pen tool or you zoomed in, spending a lot of time with the quick selection tool to get it just right. And just to be safe, you want to save the selection. How do you do that? You simply go to select and then save selection. You can name it whatever you want. You can save it as a new channel. So I'm just going to name it couple. All right, hit OK. Press Ctrl or Command D. Don't worry about it. You can go on and carry on with your editing work. The selection is saved. Now you might ask, Unmesh, that is fine, but where is it saved? And how can I load it? There are two ways. You can go to channels right here. Or if you don't see channels, go to window and make sure channels is checked. Now inside of channels, you will have this couple channel. All you have to do is to hold the Control or Command, click on the thumbnail of the couple channel and you have your selection back. One other straightforward way is you can easily go to select and then load selection. And in the drop down, choose couple. If you have other selections saved, it will show up right here. Choose the couple one, hit OK, and there you have your selection. And that's how to save and load selections. Now there are three major ways in which we can modify a selection. Number one, contract. Now what is contract? It's not the agreement that we are talking about. It is simply decreasing it in size. By the way, I looked it up in a dictionary. So right here we have a statue and we masked it out. As you can see, there's still a little bit of the halos around the edge. So how can we fix it? First of all, let's load the selection. You can create a selection out of a mask by holding the Control or Command and clicking on the mask right here. Now we have a selection. Now if we want to push the selection in, or in other words, decrease the size of the selection, we can easily go to Select, Modify, and then contract. Now, how many pixels you want to contract it by, how much you want to push it in, and this is measured in pixels. So let's first zoom in, hit cancel for now. How many pixels we want to push it in? That's 1, 2, 3, about 2 or 3. Let's put it 2 for now. Let's go to select, modify, and then contract right here. Let's choose 2 pixels, hit OK. As you can see, the selection goes inside by 2 pixels. And now we can paint the outside with black inside of the mask. So right now the statue is selected. We want to select the opposite of it. Now how do we invert a selection? Not a mask, just the selection. We press Ctrl-Shift-I, Command-Shift-I. It inverts the selection. And we want to fill it up with black. So with the foreground color black, you can always press X to toggle between the foreground and the background. Press Alt Backspace or Option Delete, and there you go. It's gone. Press Ctrl or Command D. The halos are gone. Now the second way to modify a selection is expanding. But why would you want to use it? Let us understand with this example. Let's say you want to blur the background. For it, we want the subject to be on a separate layer. So select the background layer and then press Ctrl or Command J to create a duplicate. Now select any of these 3 tools to have the select subject at the top. I'm repeating it too much. Click on select subject, but we need to understand it as well. Now, once you have a selection, let's click on the mask button right here to mask it out. And now we have a subject on a separate layer. Let's name this layer subject. Now, we cannot just simply select the background and blur it. If we try to do that, it will create a haloing effect around the edge. So if you select the background, let's go to filter, blur, and then Gaussian blur for now. Have a look. It creates this halo effect around the edge. 52.4 is okay. Hit OK. Why is the halo effect happening? Because if you turn off the subject, the background we just blurred also had the subject in it, which also got blurred. So when you turn on the subject, that didn't sound right, but anyway, you see this haloing around the edge. That is the blurred part of the subject that we just blurred along with the background. So we need to remove the subject before blurring the background. Again, we cannot simply remove it. Have a look at it. Let's go back to how it was. Now let's turn off the subject layer for now. Let's make a duplicate of the background layer just to have a backup. Press Ctrl or Command J. And now let's make a selection of the subject again. We already have a mask, so hold the Ctrl or Command, click on the mask to create a selection, to load the selection. And then if you directly go to Edit and then Content Aware Fill and make sure the output is current layer to keep it simple and hit OK, you'll see some problem. Press Ctrl or Command D. Have a look around the edges. It leaves out traces. So how do we fix that? Let's go back to how it was. The way to fix it is first, let's load the selection by holding the Ctrl or Command and clicking on the mask. And now what if you expand the selection? By going to Select, Modify, and then Expand. Let's expand it by 50 pixels. That should be fine. Hit OK. It is expanded and now let's fill it. Let's go to Edit, Content Aware Fill. No chance of leaving traces. Hit OK. Now the subject is gone. Press Ctrl or Command D. And now let's turn on the subject. And now you can select the background right here. Let's go to Filter, Convert for Smart Filters, so that whatever filter we apply, we can change the values later. Now let's go to Filter, Blur Gallery, Tilt Shift, because we want to add a gradual blur. We already covered Tilt Shift before in this lesson. So if this is confusing to you, you can rewind the video. Let's start the blur from right here, make it gradual to this point, and add some blur, about 70. Hit OK. And that's how to blur the background. I did too much so that you can see what is happening right here. So here's the before, here's the after. And the last major way to modify a selection is feather. It simply makes it soft. We already covered it when we were talking about the Lasso tool, but you can modify it later as well, and here's how to do it. Let's say you want to add some shine to the eyes. So for it, let us choose the elliptical marquee tool and create a new layer first of all. Click on the new layer button and create an ellipse like this. Now to move the ellipse, as you're holding the mouse or the graphic tablet, hold the spacebar to move it around and set it inside of the eyeball, just like this. Let's make it slightly smaller. Set it like this. This is fine. Let's leave it be. Now we don't want it on the eyeball, so hold the Alt key or the Option key to subtract it and drag it like this. Now as you're holding the Alt key or the Option key, you can also hold the spacebar to move it around. So let's move it around like this. Okay. Now also we want to subtract the top. So hold the Alt key or the Option key again and create one like this. Let's subtract the top. If you want to subtract the bottom and want to keep just the intersection, you can click on this button right here and create one like this. See, that keeps only the intersection. Now if you directly fill it with white, first of all, make sure the foreground color is white. Press X to toggle between the foreground and the background. And if you fill it by pressing Alt Backspace or Option Delete, it's just too harsh. Let's go back by pressing Ctrl or Command Z or Z. Let's go to Select, Modify, and then Feather. Let's add a feather of about 10 pixels, hit OK. And now it is soft. And now let's fill it by pressing Alt Backspace. It's much softer. Press Ctrl or Command D to deselect. And now you can change the blend mode of this one from normal to overlay. And that's how you add light to the eyes. Now we can definitely make a copy of this light for the other eye. Select the Move tool right here. Hold the Alt key or the Option key and click and drag and drop it right here. There you go. We can move it around slightly so that it's perfect. Have a look at her fiery eyes. Now select the first layer. Hold the Ctrl or Command, select the second one, and then press Ctrl or Command G to group it, because it's too much. So let's decrease the overall opacity to about 50%. That's nicer. So here's the before, here's the after, and that's how you use feather in selections. So that's all the fundamentals about selections in Photoshop. Just keep in mind, what is the selection? It's simply an area that we are targeting. What you can do with it is limitless. I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and just as a reminder, to access all of the lessons of this course, you can go to learnphotoshopfree.com or go to PiXimperfect YouTube channel. Click on playlist and you'll find the playlist right here. This course is entirely free. You don't need to pay anything. You don't need to sign up. And this is the only official PiXimperfect course. Thank you so much for watching. And if this video helped you, make sure to give us a like, and also don't forget to subscribe, and not just subscribe. Ring the bell so that you, my friend, don't miss any other future tips, tricks, or tutorials. Thanks to Storyblocks again for sponsoring this video and making this lesson possible. You can check out Storyblocks by clicking the link in the description. I'll see you in my next one. Till then, stay tuned and make sure that you keep creating.
What can I do?